everyone, welcome back to our today's live stream. We are now in Taichung City, Taiwan, in central Taiwan. Here is Zhennan Temple, one of the most famous Mazu temple in Taiwan. Today the weather is very good and it's a good day for visiting temple. We are now at the main hall. This is the cooling water fan. So now we will step into the basement of Zhennan Temple. This is the Mazu Cultural Hall, or the Hall of Mazu Culture. And now the entrance, step down. Firstly, we pray to Mazu for good fortune for this life. And here is the famous golden Mazu. Here we are now at the basement of 大甲镇南 Temple and the white jet Mazu. So today, our introduction is about Mazu's legend. Who is Mazu? Where she comes from? Here at the basement of 大甲镇南 Temple, we see a series of stone carving with letters and pictures to show the life of Mazu and the miracles of her after her death and in her life. The first one of the series is a short legend about Mazu's life. It's called Mazu 简传, the brief biography of Mazu. 宋太祖建隆元年 it's about 960 CE, almost 1,000 years ago. In the third month of lunar calendar, at the 23rd day, Mazu was born in 内州, Fujian. Okay, the brief biology is followed by the stone carving picture of Mazu. This picture showing that Mazu is holding a tablet and wearing a crown and become a deity, become the sea goddess. So now let me share with you the legendary story of how Mazu, the beloved sea goddess, was born and became a divine protector for the people. This story is known as the birth of the heavenly concubines. 天妃降诞本传. Mazu was born into the Ling family of Meizhou Island in Fujian. The Ling family was famous for its uprightness and public service. Mazu's ancestor Ling Pi was lived during the Tang Dynasty, over 1,000 years ago. Ling Pi had 9 sons who all becoming governors, and they were called the 9 shepherds, 林氏九牧. Mazu's great-grandfather, Ling Baoji, was a brave military commander who fought alongside Emperor Cairong and Zhao Kuangyi, later Emperor Taizong of Song, at the Battle of Gaopingshan. After his service, he retired to Meizhou Island and lived a quiet, virtuous life. His father, Mazu's father, Ling Yuan, also called Ling Weique, married a kind woman from the Wang family, Wang Shi. They had 1 son, named Hongyi, Ling Hongyi, and 6 daughters. The youngest of these 6 daughters was Mazu. So he is the smallest daughter of Ling family. Both Mazu's parents were kind and charitable, devoutly worshipping Guan Yin, the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of mercy. But her father often worried that his only son was weak and frail, so every morning and evening he prayed to heaven, hoping for another strong child to carry on the family line. So this story is carved in stone here. It calls 求佛世子 praying to the Buddha to bestowing the Ling family a healthy son. We can see Ling family worshipped Guan Yin, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, or the Bodhisattva of mercy. They prayed to Guan Yin for begetting a son. One night, in the summer of 959 CE, her mother dreamed of Guan Yin appearing to her and saying, "Your family has practiced kindness for generations, and heaven will bless you." The goddess handed her a small pill and said, "Take this, and you will be granted a child who will bring compassion and blessing to others." Soon after, her mother became pregnant. On the evening of the 23rd day of the third month in lunar calendar, in the year 960 CE, about 1,000 years ago, Ling family was suddenly filled with a strange fragrance, and red light shot across the sky into their room. Then her mother gave birth to a baby girl. The neighbors all said it was a sign of something extraordinary. Though her parents had hoped for a boy, they were deeply moved by her unusual birth and named her Mo, meaning silent. So Mazu's original name is Ling Mo, meaning silent, because Mazu didn't cry even once as an infant. So the picture of Mazu's birth is carved here. It is called 天妃降诞, the birth of Mazu. We can see Mazu is bestowed to Ling family by Guan Yin. On the right top of the picture is the statue of Guan Yin. Why do we know she is Guan Yin? Because she is holding a willow branch and a pure water vase. This is a typical image of Guan Yin. And thanks to Guan Yin's magical power, a baby girl come to our world. We can see Mazu, the baby Mazu. And this is the Holy Mother of Mazu. So this picture you can associate with the Western culture of the Saint Maria. From a young age, Mazu was different from other girls. At 8, she started reading and writing and could already understand the deeper meaning of the text. By 10, Mazu was already spending her mornings and evenings burning incense, chanting scriptures, and meditating without ever slacking. Mazu was quiet, graceful, and wise beyond her years. At 13, an old Taoist priest named Xuan Tong visited Lin family often. Mazu welcomed him warmly and even gave him food and alms. Seeing her extraordinary nature, Xuan Tong said, "You have the heart of a Buddha. You can achieve enlightenment and help others." He began teaching Mazu the secret arts of the Tao. Mazu quickly grasped all the essential teachings. When Mazu was 16, she had her famous whale vision, where she received 2 divine talismans from a heavenly figure. From that day on, her spiritual power grew even stronger. She could perform miracles, drive away evils, and save those in danger. People sometimes saw her riding the clouds across the sea, and they began calling her the wise and spiritual maiden. 13 years later, when Mazu was just 29, she completed her spiritual path, and on the Double Night Festival, she ascended into the sky in broad daylight, achieving immortality, and so she became the protector of sailors, fishermen, and all who call her name. Mazu's life reminds us how one person's kindness, faith, and courage can fight the way for generations to come. And then we see at the wall are all the carvings, stone carvings about Mazu's story. The first one is called 窥井得福, the whale and the divine talisman. Now let me share with you one of the most mystical moments in Mazu's early life, a story known as the whale and the divine talisman. When Mazu was still a young girl. Okay, here is the statue of Mazu as a young girl. And this is a whale. And we may wonder why there is a man in a whale. Okay, according to legend, when Mazu was still a young girl, she often played and spent time with other girls from the village. One day, they wandered to a quiet well, where they started fixing their hair and admiring their reflections in the water. As Mazu gazed into the well, she suddenly saw an incredible vision. A divine figure rose from the depths of the well, holding a pair of shining bronze talismans in his hands. So this is a divine figure holding talisman, shining talisman, made in metal, made in bronze. Around him stood a group of celestial officials, standing in formation as if to escort and protect him. The other girls were terrified and ran away in fear, but Mazu, calm and composed, did not fear, did not flinch. Without hesitation, Mazu reached out her hands and received the divine talisman, just as the picture shows. Mazu reached out her hands to receive the talisman from the whale. Moments later, the figure gently dissolved into the air and disappeared, as if he had been a vision sent from the heavens. When news of this spread, Mazu's parents and neighbors rushed to the well. They found the bronze talisman still in Mazu's hand, solid, real, and clearly bestowed by divine power. Everyone was astonished and deeply moved by what they witnessed. From that day forward, those talismans became Mazu's sacred tools. Whenever she chanted spells or performed rituals, They could drive away evils and protect people from harm. Mazu's spiritual powers grow stronger and more mysterious each day. People say that even when Mazu was sitting quietly in her room, her spirit could travel beyond her body, visiting distant places, revealing fortunes and misfortunes, and helping those in need, always with uncanny accuracy. This story reminds us of how Mazu's connection to the divine was recognized and affirmed even from a very young age. It is one of the moments that shaped her destiny as the protector of the seas and the beloved goddess of countless people. Okay, this is the lamp of the Great Deeper, 斗灯, dedicated to the Southern Deeper and Northern Deeper, the two star deities who are responsible for people's destiny. It is believed that if you light a lamp and dedicate it to the deeper star, you can get good fortune and blessings for your destiny. This is the practice of 斗灯, the lamp of the Great Deeper. The next stone carving is another miracle of Mazu, 机上救亲. It is saving her father at the room. We can see the carving shows that this is a weaving machine or the loom. And why Mazu appears as sleeping on the loom, and her mother is trying to waken her up. What happened? Now, let me tell you one of the most touching and dramatic moments in Mazu's life, the story we call Saving Her Father at the Room. The weaving machine. It happened in the ninth lunar month, when strong autumn winds whip across the sea. Mazu's father and elder brother set sail together, heading north. That day, the western wind was fierce, and towering waves crashed across the waters, shaking the boats. Back home, Mazu was sitting at her loom, weaving as usual. Suddenly, she closed her eyes, just as if falling into a trance. The picture shows that Mazu falling into a trance. Her face turned pale and tense. Her hand gripped the shuttle tightly, and her foot pressed hard on the loom's treadle as though she were holding on to something and terrified of letting it go. So when Mazu in trance, her hands grasped the shuttle, and her feet pressed hard on the treadle. Why? Her mother saw this and panicked. She cried out loudly, calling Mazu's name. At that moment, Mazu awoke from her trance. So the picture shows Mazu's mother trying to wake her up. And after Mazu woke up, she cried out. Mazu awoke from her trance, and the shuttle in her hand fell to the floor with a sharp clatter. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Mazu sobbed. Father is safe, but brother is gone. What does she mean? What has Mazu seen in her trance? What has Mazu done in her trance? Soon after, a messenger arrived from the harbor to deliver the news, as it was just as Mazu had said. Late day at sea, her father's boat was tossed about by angry waves and nearly capsized several times. As we see in this picture, at the middle of the picture, we see Mazu's father and brother are in the waves. Their boat nearly capsized several times, but strangely, it felt as if some invisible force was holding the rudder steady, guiding Mazu's father's boat closer and closer to her brother's boat, and then her brother's boat's rudder broke. His boat overturned, and he was swallowed by the sea. Later, people came to understand what really happened. When Mazu fell into her trance, her spirit flowed out over the waves. Her foot was planted firmly on her father's rudder, keeping his boat steady. Her hands gripped her brother's red rudder, trying to save them both, but in the end, she could only save one. So the picture shows Mazu is flying over the sea and use her magic power trying to save both his father and his brother in the fearful waves. This story shows us how deep Mazu's love was for her family, and how she never hesitated to risk everything to save others, even at a very young age. Next picture, we also see the sea and the fearful waves, and many people and many boats on the sea was in danger. And over the sea, many wooden logs are floating close to the boat. And seeing that the wooden logs were giving support to the boat to prevent the boat from overturning, and by that saving the people's life. And who did this? On the clouds we see it's Mazu. On the western side of Mazu Island, there was a village called Menjia. It means between the doors. Why it is named between the doors? This village sat right on the main channel of the harbor, a place full of hidden reefs and jagged rocks beneath the waves. So it is a narrow channel, like between the doors. One day, a merchant ship sailing through the channel when the fierce wind struck. The ship was blown onto the rocks. Water started flooded in, and the terrified sailors cried out, desperately for help, just as the picture shows. Seeing this, Mazu said, "There are many reefs here. A merchant ship is about to sink. Hurry up and save them." But the crowd, seeing the raging winds and waves, didn't dare go forward. Then Mazu plucked a few blades of grass and tossed them toward the water. Miraculously, the grass turned into giant logs, floating out toward the struggling ships. The merchant ship leaned on these logs for support, and it did not sink. Before long, the wind and waves calmed down. The sailors on board cheered and celebrated, believing heaven had helped them. After they reached shore and began repairing their vessel, they noticed the great logs quietly drifting away, disappearing into the sea. When they asked the villager about it, they learned that those logs were actually blades of grass transformed by the divine power of Mazu to save them. Everyone finally understood their lives had been spared by the goddess grass. This is a story about Mazu, how Mazu turned grass into great wooden logs to save the ships in the waves. So here we already see two stories about how Mazu saved life on the sea. She is the sea goddess. The next stone carving is another miracle story about Mazu. Here is Mazu at her young age. We can see she is pouring something on the floor, onto the earth, and then sun sprouts are growing up at once. What she is pouring, and what plants did it become? A story called 菜甲天成 means the vegetables sprouts. In Mazu's birthplace, Meizhou Island, there is a small island located in the middle of the side stream, quiet and unassuming. One day, Mazu was traveling through the area. At that very moment, her mother sent someone to deliver a jar of vegetable seed oil to her. Mazu casually poured the oil onto the ground, and to everyone's amazement, green shoots sprouted up immediately, growing stems and leaves, and soon blossoming into beautiful flowers. So the picture shows Mazu pouring down the vegetable seed oil, and then from the earth, the green shoots sprouted up immediately and becoming beautiful blossoms. The flowers, shimmering in green and gold, covered the hillsides. They didn't need to be planted or tended. They bloomed naturally, season after season, flourishing even in the wild. The stalks, stems, flowers, and leaves could all be used as offerings to the gods and to Buddha. From then on, this little island became known as Caizi Isle, the Isle of Vegetable Seeds. Even today, the wildflowers on the island still give off a rich and fragrant scent, even though the surrounding area is barren and salty. This place remains lush, fragrant, and a true scenic. We can see here are a series of stone carving all about Mazu's story.
快点啊，泡不要这个。
范将军、范 General and 谢 General. are now at 大甲镇南temple.
好大。
这里就加这个料。
可以参观金马祖啊，再参观金马祖。
你等你啊，你出来就好了。
哎呀，
Thank you everyone for joining us in today's live stream. I'm Edison. See you next week. Thank you.